Hello, I'm sophira-lou and welcome to my channel.
Hello guys, and welcome to this month's Versus video. This is going to be a new series of videos where we challenge your favourite equipment against other favourite equipment. This is the Fineliners VS Watercolours. So what I've done is I've chosen 10 of the most popular or well-known or most easy to get to fine liners, and we are testing them up against watercolours to see how well they fare. Now please bear in mind that some of these markers are water based, so they clearly will not work very well, but this is just a demonstration purposes to show exactly what they'll do against watercolours. Now the price range on these can be anything from £1, or if you're American, or if you translate to American, that's around about $1, and to up to £7, which is the Pentel brush pen. Please bear in mind that these are all affordable markers available through pretty much any supermarket. As you can see, I've already pre-done the illustrations, and what I've done is I've very clearly labelled out what kind of pen it is, and I'll be showing you what kind of pen we'll be using against this. And there's my set of Winsor & Newton Copic watercolours. As you can see, I've done a lot of prep for this. Essentially, this has been something that's been very requested, and as you can see, I've also added a patch of the masking fine liner, which is the Frisk brand. For anyone who asks, this is one of my favourite brands of masking fluid. Now I have done this all on white card. This is just for demonstration purposes instead of using it on my more expensive watercolour paper. Hello Bella. This is just so then you have a general idea of what the ink will act like, because even on watercolour paper, which is more porous, the ink will still act the same. So the first demonstration we've got is the Pentel brush. Now the Pentel brush is probably one of the more expensive brands, and as you can see, it has a brush nib. I count this more as a fine liner because you can still use it to ink lines. Now this is a very expensive version of the fine liners, but it has very good quality ink. As you can see, I'm just showing you a close-up of the image that I've already done, and just show you that the ink hasn't gone through the paper in any way, shape or form, and none of the fine liners have managed to do that. So as you can see, the first thing I do is, I'm going to say with this now, with all of them, I have just been slapping on colour with this, and this is not to give it any way, shape or form. This is just because I want to demonstrate how the lines act more against the actual watercolour more than the actual colouring of the image. For anyone who wants to know, these lines will be available to download as a free colouring page, if you will. I'm trying to get that done and sorted for you as quick as I can, but hopefully the link should be down below. As you can see, this acts up very well against watercolours. The ink does not run at all. The only issue I do have with this pen is that the ink fades very quickly, and you'll see what I have to do is, unfortunately, I do have to go over it with the brush a little bit just so I can bring out some areas, but this does happen a lot with fine liners. And that's the Pentel brush, just a bit of a close-up there for you. This is the Stabilo? I can never pronounce it. This is a very common one that you can get, and is probably one of the more cheaper pens out of the lot. The only thing I will say is that this is a water-based fine liner, so you will have some issues with bleed. I'm just trying to show you the thing there. I was really struggling to try and get the camera to focus. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a pain in the bum sometimes. There you are. Stabilo 0.88 Fine 04. That is the actual ink, and I'm just showing you there close-ups of the actual image that I finished. And as you can see, the masking fluid has bled a little bit, which does not bode signs well for this marker. And then I'm just giving you a close-up to the name of the pen. That is Stabilo. I can never pronounce it. If someone can tell me how to pronounce it, be my guest. So the good thing is with this marker, it's a very smooth finish. Now please bear in mind that all of these images have been left with the proper amount of time to actually dry. So I've given all of these a few days to dry, so they have had the opportunity. And I'm just showing you that even without me having any colour on my brush, I'm getting the pen is bleeding an awful lot. This can be cool if you do want to have an effect, but this will bleed your lines entirely. Now, if this were lines on top of watercolour, it would completely behave differently. But if you're like me and you like to ink your image and then colour in, you will have issues with this pen. It is probably one of the more cheaper pens I do tend to go for and just inking in illustrations. And if you guys ever want to see any other like pens for Fineliners versus, let me know. As you can see, it has bled quite a lot in certain areas, and unfortunately this does not stand up very well for watercolours. And as you can see, even the fineliner section is completely faded the ink. Now this is the Letraset fineliner. You'll notice some of these pens are a little bit faded because I've had them for a while. This is the 0.3 nib. Now, see, I used Letraset brand a lot, so I would have thought that the Letraset brand of markers, fineliners, would be fine. But from putting on the masking fluid, I could see that it was already starting to bleed. Now the masking fluid didn't go on until the day before I did this video, so, and please, as I said earlier, and I'm reiterating again, this had an awful lot of time to dry the actual image, so there was no time for it to actually bleed. It behaved quite well, I will say. However, there were some issues with bleed, and as you can see, as I get on with it a little bit more, the pen bleeds more and more. The more water I laid on, the more the image bled. And unfortunately, this does not bode well if you are colouring with watercolours. And as you guys all know, I am a huge Letraset fan. I'm a huge fan of most of their products, and I was a little bit disappointed with this actually. I thought it would have bowed much better, and I'm just showing you there as well, like it's completely bleeding everywhere. Like if you go over with a wet brush, the pen was just leaking like there was no tomorrow. I'm just showing you a bit of a close-ups here, and like the lines just were not holding up. So unfortunately, and as we ripped off the masking fluid, it completely faded the lines. So this is not very good for watercolours if you are looking to do this. Now onto my favourite, the Mangaka Flexible. The Mangaka Flexible is probably one of my favourite pens, and this is by Kuretake. It has a very slightly flexible lid, so it'll give you like variation in lines, and this is the fine one. It's probably one of my all-time favourite pens, and I just cannot recommend it enough. I do like I've tried lots of different fine liners, and as you can probably tell by my collection, you know, I try different ones to see which ones work. So let's get it started. Now this is a very, very good pen for watercolours. However, there are issues with the pen, and if you're like me and you ink and then rub out your eraser lines afterwards, unfortunately the pen does fade. This does happen with an awful lot of fine liners, and I think the issue is because it is the ink doesn't come out as thick enough, because I don't have this issue when I'm using the Winsor & Newton when I'm using Indian ink, or if I'm using the Winsor & Newton drawing ink, but I seem to have this issue every time with fine liners, and I think it just might be the way it is. And as you can see, unfortunately this does not last very well against the masking fluid, but as you can see, the actual lines do not bleed. So this does work with fine liners, with watercolours, but doesn't work with masking fluid. Now this is a very old pen of mine. It's called a Paper Mate Tinky Graphic. I believe you can still get a hold of these. If not, they have rebranded. This pen is very, very smooth to use. The ink comes out extremely beautiful. The only problem I have with this pen is that the ink flows out a bit too quickly, and you end up losing ink very fast. And you do have to let it dry for a little bit before you can erase, because it will completely destroy your lines. So it's a warning from me. And I'm just demonstrating there that as I'm pushing the wet paintbrush over, there is no bleed from the lines at all, and you can just see that no cause on bleeding at all. So we're just going to slap some watercolour down and see how it holds up against heavier saturation and water. This is, I do understand this is a very long video, and this is just something that I really, I get asked quite a bit about what fine liners work best against watercolours, and I do understand that these are all affordable and well within range for a lot of young artists, and it's best for you to experiment and try to see what fine liner works best with your medium anyway. This one is probably one of my favourite, well, I say it's one of my favourite, it's one of my oldest fine liners, and this is one that I used all the time when I first started, until I discovered the Mangaka Flexible, and it's just because it just comes out so beautifully. And I'll just show you as I'm peeling off this lovely masking fluid. Look at those lines, not a single bit of fading, and I'm just demonstrating the lines closer, like not a little bit of fading at all. It's absolutely fantastic, and if you can get a hold of it, I highly recommend it. Now, this is a pain in my bum. That is this, I can never pronounce it. I think it's called the Stelter. Don't quote me, my pronunciation on words is awful. Now, this is another water-based fine liner, so I am going to warn you now, this is going to bleed like there is no tomorrow. It didn't sign very well when I put the masking fluid on, and it bled like there was no tomorrow. The masking fluid turned the lines blue, and this is a black fine liner, so I knew straight away this was going to be wrong. And the fact that when I rubbed out after the fine liner, it smudged after about, I think it was about 30 minutes. I left it for about 30 minutes to dry, and yeah, it just smudged like it was no tomorrow. So not only did it take forever to dry, right, and after I raised it, the lines faded, but look how it works against these water. There's not even any paint on that brush yet. I'm just dabbing down the excess water so it doesn't bleed way too much. I'm just dabbing on some colour now just to try and get a bit of colour in there before it completely, and I'm just like wiping off excess water. Look, I didn't even manage to get any colour down before it bled like there was no tomorrow. And just to show you, look at that bleed underneath that masking fluid. It is not very good for watercolours at all, and I do not recommend this pen. But now, if you guys find these sort of videos informative, let me know on what kind of content you would like to see next. This is the Derwent Graphic. This is a very popular line maker. Unfortunately, look, it says Japan nib and pigmented ink. So you'd think this would be absolutely fantastic kit to use. Yay, I could use this with watercolours maybe. It's pigmented ink, it should last. Warning you now, it doesn't. Look at that bleed on the masking fluid straight away. Now I'm just showing you the close-up of the lines, but look at that bleed on the masking fluid straight away. That does not bode well for your watercolours. But for the purpose and demonstration, I'm going to completely colour this in. So, are you ready to watch this picture to be destroyed? This makes me cry. So, before I even started slapping down colour, look how much it bled. It turned my colours murky and dark and grey, and I was not a happy bunny, because this probably was one of my favourite lines. But as I said, I have saved the lines so that you guys and me can recolour them at any point. So you can see I am going through and attempting to add some sort of colour and salvage this picture, and it just was not happening. That red X appearing in that corner just means everything. Look how grey and washed out the colours look, and how much it made the lines bleed. And just to peel off that marker, yeah, it did not even last against those lines. And this is the Sigma. This is one of the more cheaper brand pens again, but I am going to warn you, this is another water-based fine liner. Now, some of you may question why I've used water-based fine liners and some more of the pigmented ink. This is because 9 times out of 10 you don't realise that a fine liner when you buy, if you don't do your research, you don't realise when you pick up a fine liner whether or not that ink is going to be water based or whether or not it's going to be more alcohol based. You can see with the masking fluid it's bled like crazy. So yeah, this one did not last at all. I do apologise for the spoilers, but it really doesn't. The reason why I've been wanting to show this and why I've been wanting to go over the fine liners that I've used in the past and which I know are most popular to pick up at most pen shops. I mean, you can pick any of these up, I believe most of them at Ryman's, apart from the Kuretake and the Pentel brush pen. You may struggle to get a hold of them, but pretty much everything else you can pick up is for a very, very local market. And just to show you, look how much it bled. And when I peeled up the thing, the lines didn't even end up staying there. Absolutely, this does not last with your markers at all. And look, as I'm dropping water on, it's just bleeding like crazy. So that's a no for Sigma. Sorry, Sigma. Now, this is probably one of my favourite fine liners. And as you said, it says water and fade proof and pigment ink. Now, the Derwent also said pigment ink, but that bled. Now, I've experience with the uni pen before, so I know that this doesn't bleed. But the only problem I had with it is, yet again, when you use your eraser, it does make the lines faded. Now, this is a personal thing I don't like. It just depends on how hard you press your eraser, and I guess I'd press pretty hard with my eraser, unfortunately. But as I'm laying on paint, the ink does not run at all. It is absolutely fantastic, and this is a big thumbs up if you do want to use this pen with watercolours. It will last. It will be absolutely fine for your watercolours, and it will not bleed at all. Now, as with any markers, when you do use them, just please allow time for the marker to fully dry. This is just so then you don't create any smudging when you are erasing or anything else. And as I'm peeling up the masking fluid, look at that, it doesn't even fade at all, so that's a win. Now, Copic Multiliner. Copic Multiliner, as you know, Copic. I'm forever hearing this argument. I say Copic. It's just the way I speak. It's the way I pronounce it. Copic sounds weird to me. So you would think this marker would be absolutely fine. Look at it, it's very well, but this one I had an awful lot of trouble with when I erase stuff. As I said, I always leave my images about 30 minutes before I erase, and it smudged like crazy. So please be wary when you are erasing on this. It will smudge, so you just might want to leave it a little bit longer when you are doing that. You can see no bleed at all, and yeah, so let's slap some paint on this and see how it goes. Copic or Copic, however you pronounce it, their markers yet again are an absolute fantastic brand. I recommend any of their products if you can afford it. Now, their multiliners aren't that expensive. It's the interchangeable ones, I cannot remember them off the top of my head, but I own a few of them myself, and they are very, very good because they are reusable, and this is a more disposable one. As I said, all these pens are well within price range for anyone who wants to start out using them. But unfortunately, it did not stand up against the masking fluid. However, watercolours, it was absolutely fine. So here's our overlook of what the pens are. We have 5 winners and unfortunately 5 losers. The Uni Pin, the Manka Flexible, the Papermates, the Copic Multiliner or Copic Multiliner, and your brain, and your Pentel brush pen will be absolutely fine when using with watercolours. As with any pens, please allow ample amount of time for it to dry before you apply with watercolours. As for the ones I do not recommend for you to use with watercolours, it is the Sigma, the Stadler, the Derwent Graphic, the Letraset and the Stabilo. I do not recommend these because they will bleed, unfortunately, very, very badly, as they do not just hold up to watercolours at all. If you guys like these sort of videos, let me know what Fineliners versus you would like to see next. If you want to get discussion down below on your favourite pens or what you recommend, let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see more content from me, maybe subscribe to my channel. I would be very, very grateful to have your support in any way, shape or form. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video and stay creative.